Hello, welcome to the Western Association for College Admission Counseling Virtual College Fair. Thank you for joining us today. There's a few housekeeping announcements before we get started. You can use the Q&A button on your screen to type your questions to our presenters at any time. Your cameras and microphones are off, so the panelists cannot see or hear you. This is just one of many different sessions happening. Be sure to sign up for additional ones where you signed up for this one. Also, this presentation is being recorded. It'll be available within about a week at strivescan.com/WACAC, W-A-C-A-C. I've gotten all the housekeeping stuff out of the way, so I will step out of the way and turn it over to our presenters for this session. Thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you, Russ. I appreciate the introduction. Hello, everybody. My name is Herbie Walker. I'm a representative for WACAC. Specifically, my role with the organization is the College Fairs Chair. And my responsibility is to make sure that we are providing college fairs and in all of our territories of Nevada and California, as well as making sure that we have equitable access to the information, which is why we wanted to go virtual for the spring for everyone's safety, but also so that students can access a lot of this information on their own, in their own time, outside of our scheduled presentation. So today, and get my screen going. Sorry. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So today we are going to go over a very important topic. It's called FAFSA, the CSS Profile, and how does all this financial aid stuff work. So this is really going to be geared towards our juniors who are going to be seniors next year, and going to talk a little bit, just like to give an overview over what the FAFSA is, what the CSS Profile is, and what role it's going to play in your college application, in your college applications this fall. Now, if you are a senior, because I said this was going to be mostly for juniors, if you're a senior that is currently graduating this year and you have not done your FAFSA, it is certainly not too late. So please follow along. This is going to be an overview over what it is, not necessarily a walkthrough of the whole application. So the FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. This is a government-backed program by the Department of Education. And where this stems from is to serve the needs of citizens across the country who need additional funding for college, and specifically targeting those who may be low income or first generation college students. This is also the application that you're going to need to qualify for any federally backed student loans. That is going to be the more preferable kind of loan that I will get into later on in my presentation. The FAFSA does open up on October 1st of every calendar year. Every college, though, has their own separate deadline. So though the application for the FAFSA opens up on October 1st, that doesn't mean the deadline is October 1st or necessarily October 31st or even later the following year, March 1st. Your deadline is going to be contingent on the university that you're applying to, and they all have different requirements. A lot of times these deadlines has more to do with qualifying for the institution's aid than it is for receiving your Pell Grant or any student loans. You do have to add the universities you want your FAFSA to go to. It does not automatically go to every college in the country. You do have to take the time and add them one by one onto the application. The actual process, the actual process is not too complicated in itself. Once you go onto the Free Application for Federal Student Aid website, which is fafsa.ed.gov, you're going to be asked to register for what's called an FSA ID. And now, in order to even get access to the money that's available for FAFSA, you're going to have to complete this FSA ID for yourself and your parent. When you're getting ready to apply for your FSA ID, it's like registering for any other website, except you are going to need some very sensitive information handy. your social security number, your alien registration green card number, if it applies to you. For your parents, they're going to need their federal tax information, any records of untaxed income, cash savings, and account balances. Investments as well. The reason why the FAFSA wants all this information, they want to get a snapshot of where you stand financially. They often use your prior year's tax return to determine your financial need. If you don't have all this information, you can return and punch it in later and submit it at another time. It is very important though that you have all your financial records in order before you started them. There is going to be an option to download your parents' financial tax information to the FAFSA directly, which simplifies the process. But nonetheless, it's always good to have maybe a hard copy of your last 2 years' tax returns, just in case you needed some numbers that didn't quite transfer over. When you're filling out the FAFSA, again, it's going to be on October 1st. You have a couple of options. The best way to do it is to fill it out at FAFSA.gov. That's going to be the electronic version of the application. This is going to be the fastest way for the IRS to, for the Department of Ed to receive your information. You can do a mail-in application. You can download a PDF from the FAFSA website and fill it out by hand and then submit it. This process will take significantly longer, and I do not recommend it, as if there are any errors that does come up, it does delay the process of you receiving aid from your university. You can do electronic submission by your college or career school. You would have to approach that particular institution to see if they can help you complete the FAFSA. And again, this is another reminder that the deadlines for the FAFSA has to do with your university or your college or university itself. It's not, there's no universal FAFSA deadline. Processing the FAFSA. Once your FAFSA gets submitted, it's going to be a couple days before you receive an email confirmation. Your university might request additional information from you as well. Once you hit that send button, you're going to need, before you hit that send button, you're going to need your FSA ID as well as your parents. So both of them are going to be necessary in order to complete and send off that FAFSA. And then it's going to be about 2 or 3 days before that FAFSA to clear. You'll get an email alert telling you the details. Sometimes you will get an instant response saying that you qualify for a Pell Grant or student loans, but in other times though, it could take a little bit. If this is your first time, you're going to receive an offer from each of your college that you applied to on the list of your FAFSA, stating the amount of aid you could receive. Now, every university has their own timeline for doing this, so don't expect all your colleges to tell you your financial aid package right away. Always take your time in reviewing your offers from these schools, and make sure you have all your documents in on time. Sometimes the university may have received your FAFSA, but may want you to fill out a specific form to verify the amount of people in your home. And this is all so that they can maximize the amount of aid that they can provide for you. If you're renewing your FAFSA, it's going to be very similar to how it is the first time. You're just going to get a notification from your university saying that your FAFSA is submitted and you have your aid is posted to your account. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the different kinds of aid you can expect. The first and most popular, I would think, is the federal Pell Grant. It's usually awarded to undergraduate students who have not earned their bachelor's degree, and they demonstrate financial need. The amounts can change yearly, but the current maximum is $6,250 per year for full-time study. To qualify for that full $6,250, a student must have an EFC of 0. That EFC number is going to be automatically calculated when you punch in your tax information onto your FAFSA. So it's not something that you have to come up with. That number is it's a formula that comes up when they factor in your parents' income, the amount of dependents they may have, as well as any medical expenses, retirement that may play a factor. Pell Grants are definitely, if you qualify for a Pell Grant, absolutely go for it. This is money you don't have to return at all. The money goes straight to your university and pays the cost of your tuition. A lot of times the universities that receive your EFC number will often give you additional aid based on if you qualify for a Pell Grant or not. Even if you don't qualify for the full amount, every little bit goes a long way, which is why it's important that you do fill out this FAFSA. Federal Work Study is a need-based program that helps students earn financial funding through campus part-time work. This is where you're going to hear, if you ever heard somebody say, well, I have a job on campus, a lot of times Federal Work Study does a lot of times this is a Federal Work Study program. You may earn up to the amount that's listed on your financial aid award letter from each school. So what that means is once you receive your offer letter from a specific university, that offer letter is may include maybe $2,000 in federal student work in work study. The university is going to help find you a job on campus. Typically, it's going to be a relatively low stress job, but you might work at the library or work in an office at one of the campus departments. But the purpose of this is to give you a little bit more of an edge to your financial aid packages. You do have to mark on your FAFSA that you're interested in work study in order to qualify for this. It's not automatically given to every student. You do have to declare it's something you're interested in doing. Now, student loans, undergraduate students have a limit on the amount of loans they may secure in their name per year. And again, these loans I'm talking about are specifically loans offered through the Department of Education. Subsidized loans, which means that there's no interest on your loan that occurs while you're at school, has a typical max of $3,500 for your first year. Unsubsidized loans, that means the interest will add up while you're in college, but it's going to be at usually prime or a pretty low rate. The max is typically $2,000, but I have seen it a little higher depending on the institution, but it doesn't really go you're not going to see an unsubsidized amount for like $10,000 for your first year. That's very unlikely, but it's always going to be right around the $2,000 to $3,000 range. The total amount of student loans available for year one, again, typically is going to be about $5,500. Anything remaining is going to need to be funded by a Parent Plus loan, and that is a separate application that does not involve the student. That is something that your parents have to go through an application process and the university often helps you with that. Now we're going to get into a little bit on the CSS profile, explaining what it is. We're going to get into a little bit on how to complete it, but really going to dive into number 4, 5, and 6, where we talk about fee waivers and having divorced or separated parents will affect your application. I do want to mention one more thing about the FAFSA. If your parent is undocumented, but you yourself are a citizen, you do qualify for the FAFSA. You do qualify to apply for the FAFSA, and you can qualify for the Pell Grant. It is a more complicated process, especially when you have to submit the application, as your parents may not be able to do the electronic signature, the FSA ID. Oftentimes you'll have to physically print out a verification form, have your parents sign it, and mail it off. So if you're in that situation, please allow yourself a significant amount of time to complete your FAFSA. In my experience, families who have to do that manual signature for their FAFSA, the process can add an easy 3 to 4 weeks, depending on how busy their departments are. Now, what is the CSS profile? The CSS profile is an application for non-federal student aid. It's used by nearly 400 colleges. This program awards over $9 billion in grants. Now, the CSS profile is a private, independent method of assessing your financial need. Many of the most competitive universities in the country are going to ask you to complete the CSS profile. NYU, Stanford, MIT, they're going to want the FAFSA plus the CSS profile in order to determine your need. And many schools are doing this again because there is a high amount of need that's going around in the nation. They want to make sure everybody is getting a fair and equitable process to the application, and they want to give out aid fairly. So this is going to be your first foray to it. This is going to be a little bit more complicated, as with the FAFSA, you can automatically have a lot of your information downloaded to your application, but for the CSS profile, you do have to do pretty much all of it by hand. So why should you apply for financial aid with the CSS profile? You're going to gain access to a large source of funding that typically is not available through FAFSA alone. If your college or university requires the CSS profile to apply for institutional aid and your family needs assistance meeting your college costs, you should consider completing this. It provides access, the CSS profile also takes a closer look at family finances that the FAFSA does, and allows you to explain special circumstances you may have. Consider all your financial options by completing the FAFSA and the CSS profile. What's really good about this one, though, for the students that I worked with this past year who were affected by COVID, the CSS profile did allow that space for us to explain the family situation. Whether it was a job loss or if you had to take in an extra dependent, maybe a parent had to move back, grandparent had to move back home. This is where this application is going to have, this application is going to allow that a little room to have those statements put in so the university can consider you for more aid. In most cases, the application will ask questions about you, your parents, the information about whether or not you have siblings, and your parents' employment, income, savings, or investments are example of what you can expect. This is a comprehensive application in nature and may take some time to fully complete. But don't worry too much. Your answers are going to be saved along the way, so you can always go back and edit. The deadlines, though, are pretty firm in this realm. The universities, just like the FAFSA, have their own financial aid deadlines, but the CSS profile often does require families to submit additional paperwork to the university. So sometimes they might want a handwritten signature on a tax form that you have to send in. All this can add a little bit to the delay process. So be very mindful of those deadlines when you're applying to a school that requires the CSS profile. In order to complete it, it's important to have your financial documents in order and readily available. If you or your parents filed a federal tax return, you will need to reference certain items on these documents to complete the application. The CSS profile will ask you to provide family information from 2 years prior to the year you plan to attend college. So if you're applying to go to college in 2022, they're going to actually want 2019 and 2020 financial data. A few questions will also be asked about the anticipated year to come. So if your parents are anticipating a loss of income, this will be where you would put that information. This will give financial aid offers a better idea of your family's financial circumstances over time. W-2 forms and other records of income earned in the current year is going to be necessary. Records of untaxed income, current bank statements, mortgage information, and records of savings, stocks, bonds, and trusts. This is a very, very involved application. It's going to require lots of pieces in order to be submitted successfully. Now, when you fill out the CSS profile, you will be required to pay a fee for your initial application for admission, which includes one college program report. The fee for the initial application is $25, and additional reports are going to be $16, so it'll be per university. You can use your credit debit card to pay for this, but also know that there are fee waivers available. If you're a student that received a fee waiver if you received an SAT fee waiver at one point, it will be applied here as well. So that would also reduce the cost significantly. Now, when you're thinking of applying to maybe 8 to 10 schools that all require CSS profile, this could add up pretty fast. So, budget accordingly. This is absolutely a must in order to get even some merit aid at certain universities. So the College Board is very committed to getting fee waivers to students who deserve them or who need them. So if you don't have a waiver already, if you didn't receive a waiver for your SAT, please speak to your school counselor or reach out to the College Board directly, and they will help you determine if you're eligible to receive this fee waiver. Again, when it comes to this, please mind your deadlines. It is very imperative that you're paying attention to the due dates for all the financial aid applications. So if you do need a fee waiver and you finish the whole application, you're just waiting to get that, please allow an extra couple of days or weeks, especially if you're getting into November, December. That's when counselors are super busy. That's when admissions reps are super busy. Try to build this up as early into the fall as you can. That way we're not missing any vital deadlines to get you admitted to the school of your dreams. So who's typically eligible for a waiver? Any first-year undergraduate student whose parents live in the United States is considered for a CSS profile fee waiver under certain conditions. Students who used an SAT waiver may also receive a CSS profile waiver. In order to qualify, you must log into your College Board account using the same credentials that you use to log in for your SAT. So it's the same company that it has the backend for this program. So you only have to use one login. If you didn't use that SAT waiver, you can still qualify for income-based CSS profile fee waiver. As a general guideline, students eligible for fee waivers if their family's annual income is around $45,000 or less. Students who are orphans considered ward of the state or under the age ward of the state and under the age of 24 are automatically eligible for fee waivers. Now, this area is a little tricky. If your parents are divorced or separated, the application can get a little confusing at times. If your parents are divorced or separated, the College Board recommends completing the CSS profile with your custodial parent's information first, or the parent you lived with the most during the year. So if your father has custody, then you would start the application using his name. If your parents have joint split custody, then do your best to pick to put the family that the parent that you lived with the most throughout the year. Some colleges may also require the CSS profile from your non-custodial parent or the biological parent you did not reside with most at this time. Your non-custodial parent will need to create a College Board account and fill out their own CSS profile application. Remember, this lists all your parents, including step parents, on the CSS profile. So when you're filling this out, this is one more step that you have to, let's say you have your non-custodial parent, you put their information down, you need to reach out to them regularly to make sure that they receive the email to activate their application and that they fill out their portion of the CSS profile. So whose information would you provide? Whose information would you provide if your parents are divorced or separated? Now you can see here on the example to the right, it asks you very simply to list which parents that you actually lived with, but then you can also say the information for the parents who's going to be providing specific information on this application for you. It's a little confusing here, but it's this is so that that College Board can determine exactly is the parent that you're living with immediately, basically your primary financial caretaker, but they also want to compartmentalize that information for your step parents or parents who don't live with you. So you just have to select it very carefully in this space. How will you know if your non-custodial parent needs to complete the CSS profile? If your parents are divorced or separated, you will be prompted to share your parents' email address after you've selected your colleges. You may also add this information on your dashboard after submitting your CSS profile. The College Board will use the email address on your email address to contact your other parent with information about filling out the CSS profile. Your other parent will not have the ability to select additional colleges. Only you can. So that means, everybody, is only you can determine which colleges are going to send this information to. The colleges you're applying to also provide you with a specific financial aid application guidelines. Your non-custodial parent must create a College Board account to complete this. Now, this account needs to be unique from yours. So there may be a situation where if you have your biological parents plus a step parent, it is possible all three of them may need to fill out their own CSS profile. What to do if you do not have contact with your non-custodial parent? You're going to need to request a non-custodial parent waiver. This waiver is available on the CSS Profile website. Your request should be submitted directly to each college that is requesting the CSS profile. So that means once you get that non-custodial waiver, there's going to be an area where you upload it to each university that's asking, that you're applying for. Additional information to support your request may be required and should be submitted directly to the college you're applying to. What this means is that earlier with the FAFSA, I mentioned something called the dependent verification form. Colleges may ask different versions of that. I have seen very common this past year that colleges asking students to provide a statement, or the parent to provide a statement of their financial circumstances. Whether there was economic displacement due to COVID, if they lost their jobs, or if they had someone else move in with them, or if they had medical bills that added up that year. So you'll have to, if you're applying to 10 colleges, you need to check each college within your CSS profile to see exactly what they want you to submit. And oftentimes, the colleges have their own separate portal to submit these items to. So take your time so that you can do everything accurately and correctly. So we have about 2 more slides left, and after which we're gonna have a little bit of time to answer any questions. So if you have some questions that are queued up, please feel free to ask them in the Q&A box below, and we'll do our best to answer them out. Information for independent students. Many colleges provide institutional financial aid to independent graduate and professional students. Even if you are a student who meets the criteria to be considered independent for federal financial aid, some colleges and programs may still require parent information from you, on the CSS application. If the parent sections are displayed on your application, one or more colleges or institutions to which you're applying require that information. Because institutions will take this information into account when deciding how much aid to award, it is necessary for you to fill out these sections. Now, I have worked in the past with students who were awarded the states, who maybe lived on their own or had no contact with their birth parents. What I have seen happen in these cases is that your high school counselor can often write a statement verifying your situation. So if I'm talking to any juniors and you anticipate this being a problem, make sure you're talking to your high school counselor early so that they can help you with some of the supporting information. Information for international students. If your country's tax year does not follow the calendar year, report information from the tax year that ends before April 1st, 2021. Sorry, it's going to be 2021 for next year because this is this year's CSS profile. Be prepared to answer questions regarding your household expenses, and you're going to have to complete this application in English. Now, I'm going to leave this link up here for you guys to screenshot. These are the official websites for the FAFSA and the CSS profile. Please be very careful about going to websites that look like the legit FAFSA and CSS profile, but they're actually not the correct one. The FAFSA application will always end in a .gov, and the College Board will always end in a .org. So we're going to have some time. I have some questions here in the chat. Feel free, students, to submit your questions. I can go ahead and answer them. There's a point of clarification. For the when you're filling out the FAFSA, when you're filling out the FAFSA, only one parent needs an FSA ID, but each student needs their own FSA ID. So that means if you have multiple students going to college, let's say you have twins, let's say you have twin seniors going off to college, each student would need their own FSA ID, and at least one parent need FSA ID. Doesn't have to be both.
Hey, Herbie, there's been a few questions on here about the FAFSA and CSS profile, and some of the students think that they have to complete both. But I think it's important to say that not every school requires the CSS profile to be completed. It's often something you'll see at private institutions, as they can typically come in and offer additional aid above and beyond than what the federal government offers. So not every school will require, just ask the schools and colleges that you're applying to which financial documents they require.
Thank you, Jeremiah. That was a very good question. No, you do not have to apply for both the FAFSA CSS profile. You need to verify with the institution that you're applying to. Just like Jeremiah said, typically it's going to be your private schools that will require the CSS profile. This whole presentation, for those of you who want to rewatch it again, is going to be available in about 1 week, and you'll get an email from StriveScan letting you when that link is up. Every university requires the FAFSA in order to consider for federal student aid. Everyone. So if you want to get the Pell Grant, you have to complete the FAFSA. Okay.
There's a question, Herbie, in a household where the custodial parent gets remarried and there's a step parent in this situation, does the step parent need to include their financials in the FAFSA?
In the FAFSA, not necessarily, but the CSS profile, yes. So depending on the time of year you were married, if you're remarried for the majority of the year, you would include them on the FAFSA. Typically your FAFSA is going to go off of how you filed your taxes. So, but your CSS profile is going to go a little bit beyond that. So your CSS profile, for sure, you would have to list your step parent. Can money that we receive from the FAFSA, oh, sorry, did I miss that one?
Another question here, Herbie. Undocumented students, can they apply for the FAFSA and CSS profile?
So that's going to be a little tricky. There are universities that do provide full aid for undocumented students. The typical answer for the FAFSA is no, students cannot qualify for the aid that's provided in the FAFSA. But some universities may ask you to fill it out completely and submit it anyway, in knowing that you won't qualify for the aid. That's again to verify your information so that you can use that as well in the CSS profile. These schools that do that typically are going to require the CSS profile and the FAFSA. I can speak for UNLV. They do want undocumented students to kind of fill out the FAFSA and then submit a printed version of that, a printed version of the SAR, even if you don't qualify, because they have internal aid at UNLV for undocumented students, and that's how they receive it. So to receive the Pell Grant, undocumented students cannot qualify, but the individual university may have a process that requires you to fill out the FAFSA. Someone asked a question about if you receive any tuition, scholarship money, financial aid above room and board, can that be used for personal expenses? Absolutely. Every universities handle it a little differently, but if let's say your college tuition is $10,000, but you receive $12,000 in aid, you can often use that extra $2,000 to buy books, supplies for your dorm, any necessities you need for school. Can you be supported by FAFSA while you are in the military? That I'm not sure, because that one I don't have the answer to, I'm sorry. I know that once you're in the military, your income is going to be factored in as an independent student. So based on your military salary, not sure how much you would qualify. You would qualify for the loans for sure, the federal loans, but Pell Grant, I wouldn't be able to answer that question.
Yeah, it's going to be the same, whatever they qualify for based on the tax information that's entered into the FAFSA. Military benefits are completely separate from the FAFSA and the CSS profile. They're going to want to go through the Department of Veteran Affairs, talk to the VA rep at the financial aid office at the different colleges they're applying to. They're definitely going to want to obtain a copy of their certificate of eligibility from the Veteran Affairs office so that they know what they qualify for on the military benefit side, but they can definitely also complete the FAFSA.
Much appreciated, Jeremiah. We have about 5 more minutes left, so please get your questions in and we'll answer as best as possible.
There's a question here, Herbie, about using financial aid to help pay for housing.
Yeah, so short answer, yes, your financial aid can help pay for housing. So earlier I mentioned the example, let's say your tuition is $10,000, but you're receiving, let's say, $14,000 in financial aid. You're in most schools, tuition is billed separately than housing. If you're going to USC, for example, when USC is a school that requires the FAFSA and CSS profile, and they're going to bill you specifically for housing, food, and then tuition. Let's say that comes out to about $70,000. USC would at their school, because they're a institution that provides full financial aid, you would get $70,000 if you lived on campus. If you lived off campus, USC may reduce your aid, so you wouldn't get the full amount. But yes, you can use financial aid dollars to pay for housing.
there was a good question here, Herbie. Someone asking about, can they complete the FAFSA again after their freshman year?
Yes, once you complete your FAFSA your freshman year, you're going to have to renew it every year, and try not to fall too far behind on that, because some universities have different deadlines for priority aid for returning students, and they do incoming freshmen. So yes, you do need to reapply for the FAFSA every year. Jeremiah, do you happen to know the CSS profiles every year? I don't think it is, but it's one time.
It's
right?
not every year, because it's often private institutions or more selective colleges that are using it to determine institutional aid. And that's kind of factored in on the need, and they'll package that into it, and it's kind of part of the plan moving forward. But the FAFSA definitely. So no to the CSS every year.
All right.
There was a question here about, do you need a specific GPA for CSS profile? But I think it's a good opportunity for you to just say these financial forms have nothing to do with your academic achievement. And it's definitely just about the financials and determining your family's need, so that colleges and the federal government can determine how much they need to help you to go to school.
100%. You do not need to have a GPA. So you don't need to submit GPA or test scores for the FAFSA application or CSS profile. This information is really based on need, and it goes straight to the university. The university, once they receive that information, they do what they need with it. So they have their own requirements of the university of determining, we will give scholarships based on what we see, or we'll give aid based on what we see. But to apply, no, not have to submit scores or GPA.
And there's another question here that probably other people have on their mind if they've never gone to college and helped pay for it, is, can the FAFSA pay for the entire college tuition, or only part of it? Or even just all of college in general?
It depends. It depends on the school you want to go to, and it depends on what you qualify for. I have seen many students who are reasonable with their school budgets pay for their college experience based on their Pell Grants and staff and subsidized student loans. So a lot of it's going to come down to how well you budget. Often, and Jeremiah, I don't know if you agree or disagree, but we can have a brief discussion on it. But the Parent Plus loans, I personally hesitate and recommend families taking because it often puts you pretty far out of a budget for certain families. So I often tell students, be really careful about getting any loans that goes beyond what you see on the FAFSA. Often, if you go to in-state school, your FAFSA can come pretty close to paying your tuition. Room and board, that's going to depend on the region. Any last minute questions before we shut down? Yes, these applications are strictly for need-based aid. If you cannot reach your parent or guardian to get your information, please reach out to your school counselor. A lot of times they can help you they can help you fill out a statement where they will verify your parent is not reachable. Okay, well, I want to thank everybody for coming to our presentation today. It was an absolute pleasure for myself, Jeremiah, to give this for you. This Zoom link you will get an email to download this session in about a week or so if you want to review and go over this information. But I want to thank Russ for hosting us, and I'm going to release you guys so you can get started to going to the rest of the fair.
Thank you. I just want to quickly reiterate about that you'll be able to access this recording in about a week. You'll get the email to the link. The website is strivescan.com/WACAC. WACAC. Also, when you close this window, there'll be a link to a very quick 4-question survey. We'd appreciate any feedback you can provide. And this is just one of many sessions being hosted. Be sure to sign up for additional ones where you signed up for this one. Once again, thank you to our presenters for all the great information during this session. And the college fairs and the 6x6 sessions are on the way next. So thank you very much. Have a great rest of your Wednesday.